Resurrection Bay in Alaska shelters tidewater glaciers and one of the world's densest humpback whale feeding grounds. A convergence of ice and life found in almost no other fjord. Do you know that the Tongass National Forest is the planet's largest temperate rainforest, where trees living thousands of years tower beside glacial rivers? Resurrection Bay harbors one of the planet's steepest sea-to-summit transitions, where granite peaks rise almost vertically from deep, whale-rich waters. Do you know Resurrection Bay remains largely ice-free through much of the year because deep tidal channels and the Alaska coastal current funnel warmth into its fjords, letting glaciers and maritime life meet? The same waterways carved by ancient ice now guide fishing skiffs and expedition boats through narrow passages hewn by the hardening icefield. From Seward's Harbor, you can watch small skiffs thread between rafts of sea otters and the distant thunder of calving glaciers, and Aleutian and Holgate Bays. Humpback whales return each summer to exploit the plankton blooms that form where cold glacial melt meets nutrient-rich currents. Orcas and transient pods hunt the schools of herring that gather in eddies along the bay's steep shorelines. Intertidal pools on Resurrection Bay's rocks host species adapted to violent swings of temperature and wave, from resilient sea stars to squat chitons. Higher up, the outflow glaciers pour like frozen rivers into fjords, knitting alpine tundra to kelp forests below. One boat ride moves you from kelp-strewn coves into cathedral-like fjords where tidewater glaciers calve with explosive force. Communities here are stitched to the water. Seward's docks, ranger stations, and remote cabins all depend on passages carved long before human maps existed. Every route tells an older story. The hardening icefield feeding glaciers, Pacific currents carrying nutrients, and salmon cycles that bind mountain to ocean. Resurrection Bay is less a single scene than a hinge where mountain, ice, and sea pivot together in restless motion. Spend an hour here, and the geology will whisper centuries, while a single tide can hint at tomorrow's coastline. Tongass National Forest is the largest temperate rainforest on Earth, covering roughly 16.7 million acres of old-growth trees and glacier-carved fjords. Do you know Tongass National Forest shelters some of the world's oldest Sitka spruce and western red cedar, living monuments that shape coastal ecosystems unlike anywhere else? Moss-draped trunks rise beside cold, tannin-stained streams where salmon run, linking inland valleys to the Inside Passage. Bears, Eagles and wolves depend on these salmon highways, creating a rhythm between land and sea that has sustained indigenous cultures for millennia. Islands and fjords stitched across Tongass led the eye toward Glacier Bay and the glacial tongues that sculpted this coastline. Those icy giants feed nutrient-rich waters that bloom with plankton, drawing humpback whales and orcas into narrow channels. On Prince of Wales Island, ancient forests converge with cedar swamps and karst caves, carrying stories of craft and medicine. Each valley and inlet connects outward, to fishing villages, to national parks, and to the larger story of how wild places sustain us. Understanding Tongass means understanding the delicate negotiations between nature, culture, and industry that will determine its future. And as climate warms, the forest's role as a carbon sink and refuge for migrating species becomes increasingly urgent. In the next section, we'll walk those soggy trails, listen for salmon in the riffles, and watch glaciers calve into waiting waters. Step by step, the Tongass reveals not only ancient trees, but the choices that will shape a changing world. On the edge of the Aleutian chain, Dutch Harbor and Unalaska sit within one of the planet's most productive oceanic convergence zones, where nutrient-rich currents fuel dense kelp forests and colossal seabird colonies. Do you know that Unalaska's Makushan volcano and braided tidal channels form warm pockets that let subarctic kelp thrive year-round, attracting enormous herring runs and dense flocks of puffins? The town's harbors, carved by glaciers and reshaped by storms, are the front line for the Bering Sea's richest fisheries. Dutch Harbor's piers cradle a fleet that hauls crab and pollock through seas so violent they became the subject of television legend. Beneath the everyday grind of cranes and fish processing plants, you can still find relics from 1942, when this port was the only American soil bombed during World War II. Rusting bunkers and pummeled airfields link fishermen to soldiers, and the stories of survival stitch into the town's weathered crews. Followed by the migration of millions of fish, these events tie the remote town's fortunes to invisible currents stretching across the North Pacific. Between volcanic steam and industrial cranes, the landscape insists on its own calendar, a rhythm every resident learns to read. And if you think this is only about fishing and war, wait until you meet the people who navigate glaciers, courts, and global markets from this tiny, crucial outpost. Their stories reveal how remoteness became resilience, turning harsh weather into a source of identity and ingenuity. Stay with us, and we'll walk the docks, climb Makushan's foothills, and listen to secrets carried by the bearing winds. The Brooks Range contains the northernmost major mountains on Earth, outside the polar ice caps, with peaks pushing permafrost and glaciers into a fragile high-latitude ecosystem. Do you know the Brooks Range launches the longest terrestrial migration in North America, where the western Arctic caribou herd travels more than 700 miles each year? Ridges chop the sky into serrated silhouettes, while tundra carpets the valleys with mosses, dwarf shrubs, and lichen that survive extreme cold. From these heights, the Noatak, Kobuk, and Sagavanirktitak rivers begin, carving wild corridors that sustain salmon runs and ancient human paths. Gates of the Arctic National Park protects huge tracts of this range with no roads, leaving landscapes almost untouched by modern infrastructure. This remoteness means polar night winters and midnight sun summers still dictate life cycles for grizzlies, wolves, golden eagles, and millions of migratory birds. Beneath the surface, the Brooks Range is a geological scrapbook. Tectonic collisions exposed rocks bearing fossils and minerals not commonly seen this far north. Scattered open lakes reflect sudden storms and hold populations of Arctic grayling that feed both bears and a people. Indigenous communities, Gwich'in, Koyukon, and Inupiat, read the range like a living map, tracing caribou trails and river routes that link hunting camps and villages. In winter, the range funnels winds that sculpt snow into cornices and create microclimates where rare alpine plants survive the cold. In spring, those winds thin, rivers rise, and the lowlands awaken in flushes of life that echo the rhythms at the mountain's heart. Conservationists argue that protecting the Brooks Range safeguards more than scenic peaks. It preserves migration highways and genetic reservoirs for Arctic life. And And as the rest of the planet warms, these northern mountains may become crucial refuges for species seeking cooler habitats. Follow the rivers east or west, and you find how the Brooks Range stitches into the wider geography of Alaska, from interior boreal forests to the ice-edged coasts. Understanding this range is to understand much of Alaska's natural story: wild, interconnected, and always changing. On Baranof Island, Sitka National Historical Park preserves the only federally protected sample of temperate rainforest in the region, where ancient totem poles stand among Sitka spruce and western hemlock. Do you know that the park's living forest and carved monuments record centuries of Tlingit history, Russian occupation, and a natural resilience few places can claim? Along the shoreline, driftwood and kelp frame the trails that lead to totem groves and stories carved in cedar. The Battle of Sitka in 1804 left echoes here, and the park now bridges a tumultuous past with contemporary efforts to restore and interpret Indigenous heritage. Rangers and Tlingit elders work together to conserve poles, sometimes replacing decayed sections with traditional cedar and ancient carving techniques. Visitors following the quiet paths often find themselves stepping from forest into cultural memory, where each carving is a map of clans and myths. Birdsong, salmon runs in nearby streams, and the low thunder of surf remind you this is a living ecosystem. As much as an open-air museum. The adjacent waters bring orcas and humpbacks close to shore, linking the park's forest stories to the marine corridors of the Inside Passage. Small replicas in the visitor center guard originals that were moved for preservation, but elsewhere, weathered poles stand where they were first raised. Interpretive panels and tribal-led programs explain the symbolism, from raven trickster figures to crest animals that declare family histories. Restoration projects here have inspired similar efforts across the coastal rainforest, connecting Sitka's conservation to the larger Tongass landscape. Walk away from a totem, and you can trace your path to other heritage sites, port towns, and glacier-fed bays that shape this coastline. At sunset, the light finds the red ochre and black paint of traditional designs, illuminating stories that refuse to be forgotten. It is a place where nature and culture meet so closely that one can read a community's survival strategy in the rings of a spruce. Chugach National Forest stretches across nearly 6 million acres of glacier-scarred mountains, tidal fjords, and temperate rainforest. It borders Anchorage and opens directly onto Prince William Sound, making remote Alaskan wilderness unusually accessible. From the blue faces of Portage Glacier to the cliffs above Turnagain Arm, Chugach presents rapid shifts in terrain and climate. Salmon-rich streams run from ice fields to sea, sustaining orcas, eagles, and the coastal communities that depend on them. Trails and waterways tie Chugach to nearby Kenai landscapes and the islands of Prince William Sound, linking places and livelihoods. In winter, heavy snow and avalanches reshape accesses, concentrating wildlife and people into narrow river corridors and coastal strips. Those seasonal movements reveal how climate fluctuations can immediately rearrange habitats and food webs across this stitched-together coastline. Paddle a fjord, and you can pass tidewater glaciers, then follow currents that carry nutrients to the Gulf of Alaska. Look inland, and the forest rises fast, offering panoramas that connect lowland estuaries to distant glacial peaks. Managing Chugach balances timber, recreation, subsistence fishing, and protection of salmon runs. Rivers and inlets move energy and life between mountains, people, and ocean ecosystems beyond the forest. Walking here traces geological, ecological, and cultural connections across a landscape in motion. Next, we follow streams from Chugach into Prince William Sound, where the land yields its secrets to the sea, and deep currents carry life across oceanic highways toward distant shores. Beneath the northern temperate rainforests, Alaska's Mendenhall Glacier calves icebergs into a milky jade lake, unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. Do you know that the glacier is fed by the vast Juneau ice field and still hides ancient air bubbles and fresh water that's thousands of years old? Visitors glimpse sculpted blue ice, towering seracs, and a rhythm of cracking that speaks to a living, moving landscape. Trails from the Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center thread through rainforest to vantage points where Nugget Falls pours silver into the same basin. The color of the lake comes from glacial flour, microscopic rock ground to powder by moving ice that refracts light into turquoise tones. Kayakers skirt luminous bergs, and scientists collect sediment cores to read a climate story, written layer by layer in silt and ice. Once a continuous ice sheet, Mendenhall has retreated more than a mile in the last century, carving new shorelines and revealing forests swallowed by ice long ago. Beneath every fissure, there are stories of pressure, movement, and time, tiny phenomena that add up to enormous change. Researchers camp on the icefield to measure meltwater, track crevasse shifts, and watch how the glacier's heartbeat responds to warmer summers. Nearby Glacier Bay and the Tongass National Forest are part of the same ecological conversation, where melting highs reshape coastlines and communities. Standing at the overlook, as bergs calve, you can feel the past and present collide and wonder what the landscape will write next. How will Mendenhall's slow vanishing redraw maps, feed rivers, and alter the paths of life that depend on its melt? The Talkeetna Mountains form one of the rare ecological transition zones where subarctic taiga abruptly gives way to glacially sculpted alpine terrain, a combination found in only a handful of places worldwide. Do you know the Talkeetna Mountains create a natural funnel that concentrates alpine runoff into the Susitna River, shaping habitats as far as the Gulf of Alaska? From the needle-like ridges near Talkeetna town to the rounded summits farther north, the range reads like Earth's diary of uplift and erosion. Hiking down a single valley can carry you from spruce-draped slopes into tundra speckled with lichens, older than many nations. Local pilots and bush travelers treat this range as a living map, noting glacial tongues that swell and recessiate from year to year. You can trace veins of quartz and schist that tell of ancient collisions and volcanic whispers beneath the surface. In winter, avalanches redraw ridgelines and leave behind fields of blue ice that glow under low-latitude sun. In summer, wildflowers carpet scree and bring pollinators into high, unexpected communities where roads never reach. Talkeetna's proximity to Denali creates one of the most dynamic weather theaters in Alaska, where mountain shadows birth sudden storms. This is why field notes taken in a Talkeetna Valley can shape conservation plans across Alaska and beyond. By night, the mountains hold starlight like a trap, and under auroral curtains, the landscape reads as an ancient, slow-moving ledger. That ledger records summers of fire, winters of glacier advance, and the human footsteps that have silently free its margins. To walk a ridge here is to step between epochs, from bedrock secrets to living streams, and to feel how one place threads into the next. In the next segment, we'll follow that thread northward toward the glaciers and towns that depend on the Talkeetna Mountains' hidden pulse. Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska hosts some of the planet's most dynamic tidewater glaciers, where ice the size of city blocks collapses into the sea and shapes new coastlines in human lifetimes. Do you know Glacier Bay's glaciers retreated more than 65 miles since Captain Cook charted the inlet, revealing forests, rivers, and wildlife that had been buried under ice for centuries? Here, blue-white walls of Marjorie and Johns Hopkins glaciers still grind at the edges of steep fjords, belching thunderous calving echoes that travel for miles. But Glacier Bay is more than ice. It is a living laboratory where newborn shorelines are colonized first by hardy mosses, then shrubs, and within decades by alder forests, teeming with life. Humpback whales feed in the nutrient-rich waters, while orcas, sea otters, and sea lions trace the deep channels carved by ancient ice. On land, brown bears and mountain goats patrol the rising ridgelines, following salmon runs down rivers that were carved when the ice retreated. Scientists have mapped succession zones where you can read ecological time like tree rings, watching soil and species change along gradients that track the glacier's march. From the glassy fjords of Glacier Bay, currents sweep west toward Icy Strait and the open Gulf of Alaska, linking glaciers, coastal rainforests, and the rich marine highways beyond. Visitors arriving by small boat often witness the instant geography of calving ice, then glide into sheltered coves where glassy tidewater pools reflect floating bergs like weathered sculptures. Every year, the park's dramatic collisions of ice and ocean redraw maps, forcing species and people alike to adapt faster than in most other wild places on the Earth. Preservation here is a race against change. Park rangers, native Tlingit communities, and scientists work together to document shifts in glacier mass, wildlife distribution, and cultural sites. And while Glacier Bay stands apart for its raw, unfolding drama, those same forces of ice and sea shape the neighboring sounds and islands, silently tying this park to the broader Alaskan coastline. In winter, the park becomes quieter. The calving slows and the skiffy fills, with migrating birds that use the sheltered inlets as way stations on epic journeys. As glaciers continue their unpredictable retreat, newly exposed shorelines preserve archaeological glimpses of human life, spanning thousands of years, connecting Tlingit stories with modern science. Denali National Park and Preserve holds North America's tallest peak, Denali, whose summit rises to 20,310 feet and creates one of the planet's most dramatic vertical reliefs. Do you know the mountain's Koyukon name, Denali, means the high one, and that its massif seems to char from lowland valleys with nearly 18,000 feet of local relief? From the coastal fjords we visited earlier, the landscape shifts so abruptly here that you can stand in a taiga forest and see glaciers bleeding into Skastay. The park's 6 million acres trap storm systems and sunlines that sculpt sudden weather and mirror like alpine lakes. The park road threads 92 miles into wilderness, a human spine that ends in the fragile heart of the preserve. Only specially permitted buses continue deep inside, which keeps the wild corridors intact and gives wildlife room to roam. The restoration of Denali, as the mountain's official name, returned an old respect to those who lived with this land for generations. But perhaps the most striking thing is how quiet it can be here. So still that small sounds travel for miles and the sky seems to listen. That silence makes every bird cry. Distant collapse of ice and slow-moving stream feel like a conversation with the planet itself. We'll examine how warming temperatures are nudging glaciers and altering migration routes in ways researchers are still trying to predict. And we'll meet the pilots, rangers, and elders whose lives fold into Denali's seasons, reading weather like scripture and mapping memory onto the land. By the time we leave this valley, you may see why Denali is more than a peak on a map. It's a measure of scale, history, and what it means to belong to a place. If you thought you knew the far north, Denali will make you rethink distance, silence, and the true cost of change. Turnagain Arm's tidal swings carve a fjord-like inlet where tides can exceed 30 feet, creating one of the most extreme tidal environments on Earth. Do you know Turnagain Arm hosts a rare tidal bore that sends standing waves upriver, and thrill seekers sometimes surf its unexpected surges? Along its shoreline lie vast glacial mudflats that look like black glass at low tide, but hide quicksands notorious for trapping boots and vehicles. These mudflats periodically reveal ancient tree stumps and layered sediments, offering a geological time capsule of Alaska's Ice Age past. Beluga whales drift into the Arm from Cook Inlet, their pale bodies bobbing against the tide and surprising visitors within sight of anchorage. Bird migrations turn the exposed flats into feeding grounds for sandpipers and brant, a spectacle of life synced to the ocean's clock. The Chugach Mountains rise sharp and close from the arm's edge, reflecting their snowfields in the mirror of incoming tidewater. The Seward Highway hugs this dramatic seam, linking the arm to Girdwood's hot springs and the glaciers beyond. Local Denali stories and explorer journals both speak of travelers forced to turn again when shoals and tides proved impassable. At high spring tides, the bore becomes a loud, rolling announcement, a reminder that this landscape is governed by planetary rhythms. Scientists study Turnagain Arm to understand extreme intertidal ecosystems, tidal energy potential, and how marine mammals adapt to such volatile waters. Hikers and photographers chant sudden fog and sunlight that paint the arm in shifting moods, each tide revealing new compositions. From here, the road and waterways thread toward Portage Glacier and the Kenai Peninsula, linking the arm's raw forces to Alaska's broader glacial story. To stand on its edge is to feel how water sculpts mountains and coastline, and to sense the hidden rules that keep this place in motion. Night brings another surprise. The shoreline can glimmer with bioluminescent plankton after certain blooms, turning the edge of the arm into stars on water. Winter flips the script, freezing fringe waters and inviting ice-sculpted vistas where seals and eagles patrol the frozen margins. Every visit to Turnagain Arm is a lesson in timing. Miss a tide, and you'll miss the show. Arrive right, and you'll witness a landscape performing ancient choreography. Follow the arm south, and the story continues, where glaciers, fjords, and coastal islands carry the same restless energy into the broader sweep of Alaska. Only a handful of places on Earth host tidewater glaciers that calve directly into the sea, like Alaska's Glacier Bay and the neighboring fjords, turning ocean waters into moving fields of blue ice. Do you know that Hope Point is perched where Glacier Bay's glacial outflow meets a narrow Pacific throat, creating currents so rich with minerals they paint tidal pools electric turquoise? At low tide, Hope Point reveals a mosaic of tide flats and kelp forests that are connected by an underground web of nutrients to distant reefs in Prince William Sound. Storms and spring tides funnel plankton toward its headland, and that invisible feast in turn it summons entire marine highways of salmon, sea lions, and humpbacks. Local Tlingit elders say the rocks here remember the runs of fish and the old canoe routes that threaded from Hope Point to Sitka Sound. Archaeologists have found tools and fish bones buried beneath peat, evidence that this junction has been a superhighway of life for millennia. In summer evenings, the cliffs glow with nesting murres and puffins, whose numbers are bolstered by currents that carry nutrients from glaciers to the open ocean. Those links reveal that what happens at this little headland can ripple hundreds of miles, affecting fisheries and the cultures that depend on them. If you follow the currents from Hope Point, you arrive at places where tidewater glaciers sculpt sea caves and where whales map ancient migratory lanes. Understanding this connective tissue is why conservationists are fighting to protect Hope Point as part of a larger mosaic that includes Glacier Bay and Kenai. To stand on Hope Point is to stand at a seam where ice, ocean, and human history are stitched together in sudden living color. In the next segment, we'll trace one of those threads, a salmon run that begins in glacier melt and ends at the doorsteps of coastal villages, binding nature and people. From the glass blue face of Mendenhall to the thunderous calving of Columbia Glacier, Alaska keeps changing the way we measure wilderness. The glaciers feed rivers that braid through temperate rainforests and empty into the channels where humpbacks and orcas move like living punctuation marks. Denali's solitary bulk reshapes weather and legends, its slopes feeding stories across native Athabascan and modern communities. Those communities in turn carry traditions that read the land like a living map, from salmon runs in Bristol Bay to caribou migrations on the North Slope. In Prince William Sound, tidewater glaciers carve fjords that join the Inside Passage, guiding ancient trade routes and contemporary voyages alike. That same corridor links to Katmai and its brown bears, where volcanic soil and salmon create one of the richest feeding grounds on Earth. Above it all, the northern lights stitch the sky into a moving laboratory of charged particles, reminding us how Alaska intersects with forces far beyond its borders. And in the Arctic, permafrost and sea ice are signals of rapid global change, making Alaska both a refuge of beauty and an early warning system for the planet. To travel here is to watch ecosystems, cultures, and geology speak to one another across scales of time and distance. If we listen, Alaska offers not just postcard moments, but urgent lessons about stewardship, resilience, and how intimately connected we all are.